Now, let me tell you something. Let's go into sex here a little bit and just talk about some particular thing. Let's assume that there's a male and female, and the female requires a certain sex a certain way. And let's assume you just jump on, have your orgasm, and then get up and make some hot coffee and drink it. That's your pattern. Her pattern is sweet nothings, foreplay, and all that. And foreplay is what you used to do as a kid to get to that point. You know?
Yeah.
After you're married, you don't need to seduce her and thrill her and all that. You just go to bed. Some people do that. And so the wife says, or the husband says, you've got to stimulate me. And the wife says, well, how do I stimulate you? Well, you know, rub the back of my neck, bite my ear. And if she does exactly what you laid out, then you don't feel that it's real. It's an act. And so you're not turned on. And if you say to your wife, you know, run your tongue over my ear, that turns me on. And if she does it, oh, well, all right, she does it, it doesn't turn you on because there's a bitch behind it. So what has to happen is that sex cannot be, a psychiatrist who says, or a psychologist says, well, now look, you know, sex is something between two people, and you have to stimulate the other person on. I don't believe that. I think that whatever the hell your sex patterns are, if you meet somebody that has similar patterns, you will be gratified. And if you have to instruct in the patterns, then it'll come through as synthetic. You think you know what I mean?
This doesn't follow with some other things you say.
Let me try it again.
No, I know what you mean
if
here.
If you have to go through a whole series of things to turn someone on, the sex becomes laborious.
Oh, but you can make suggestions and try things. I mean, that's...
I don't mean that. The person says, sure, it's a great idea, that's right.
I see.
But if the person says, I don't like to do that, and you say, well, go ahead, you're not stimulating me. If you do that, it's Rosalie drives with her foot on the clutch all the time. This is the truth. And I'm always bothering her when I'm poking her, get your goddamn foot off. It's her car. Or you can suggest that if you don't, you get more, less problems. And she says, thanks a lot, I'll provide my own. Let go. Let it go. Now, we don't do that. We stay on. And so we become irritated. There are people that'll put things upon you, constantly put things on you. And so your idea is to not let them put things on you.
What do you mean put things on you? Criticize you?
Well, no. I'll say, well, look, are you going to Hollywood tomorrow?
Oh.
Take these 2 rolls and
drop them off.
Yeah. Say, where do you want to drop off? I say, over there. Jesus. There are people that have put things upon you. But if you depend on those people, you better let them put things upon you up to a point.
Or you need them.
Yes, because a relationship is accepting some burdens from the other person. But another person can't sense your attitudes. You really can't sense your attitude. I don't care that Birgit piles lots of dishes up in the sink. It's her sink. But I care if she piles them up in this sink. I really don't care. If she did. Now the point is, if it bothered me, I tell her that if you eat here, you wash your dishes right after you eat. Otherwise, you don't use my dishes. She said, Jesus Christ, you're a pain in the ass to live with. You know that? And it doesn't mean I'm a pain in the ass. It just means that my system is alien to her system. Now, if I come into John's apartment, he's got books and papers all over the desk, and I say, Jesus Christ, how can you live in that mess? Now, I've insulted him, because he didn't call me in as a consultant in desk organizing. There are many people that don't call upon us for those purposes. When I come to visit Alex, I say, what are you, still trying to get a job in theater? Why don't you get a job in the factory and get yourself a steady job? He didn't call upon me as a consultant. He didn't say, Jacque, I don't know what to do with my life. Then you can suggest 19 things. And he says, well, let me think about it. The point is that we come upon people and we say, you know what you ought to do? You ought to convert your top this way or do that. And unless John says, I've got this car and I want to carry a lot of aluminum, I said, well, cut off a piece of tubing here and put it there, and then slip your extrusion through and put a clamp lock on so you don't need to tie it on anymore. He says, that's a good idea. Why don't you do it to your own car? Because I'm not that concerned. He says, but you pick up a lot of extrusions. Why don't you do that? You're always tying the fucking things on. I said, that's my pattern, and apparently it doesn't bother me that much. Okay? So the idea is when you suggest something to a person, and they say, well, why don't you do that yourself? Whatever I talk about at these sessions, I may not necessarily do myself. Nor do I advocate that anybody do it. I just toss it out, and if you can use it, use it. Now, a person comes up and says, every time I read, my eyeglasses slip forward. well, you can heat this and bend it again, which is a pain in the ass. Or I like eyeglasses like this, which I'm not about to make yet. The back end of the eyeglasses I want like that, and I want a band around my head, adjustable, so when I leave, it never moves forward. And so I may make that when I get around to it. But when I'm annoyed that much, I will make it. But apparently, it's easier. Sometimes the problem I'm working on is more important than stopping and making that. Sometimes stopping and making that is the answer. But I don't wrestle with myself. If I go into the shop and I say, I'm going to make a rack now to support all those little things that I've got, and I look around, I don't have the metal for it. I then go out and look for it. And if they haven't got it, I suspend that project. But I don't accumulate unfinished business. Do you know what that means? If you accumulate things you ought to do, you will be burdened, you won't be able to sleep. You get up nights, and because, I talked about it before, it's called unfinished business. So I have a lot of business, but I don't even call it unfinished business. I'll set upon it when I feel like it. And if I set it aside, I don't worry about it. If I set it aside, I don't say, well, you ought to do that. I think you do that. If you set a thing aside that you wanted to do and accumulate parts, do you worry about it? That you ought to do it?
If I can't finish it, no. If I don't have it,
then you set it aside. Now, how interesting that is. So if you've got all of these things that you do, that you want to do, and you start on this one, you can't get it done, you go to the library and they have the book you want, so you read that. But there's a lot of things everybody has that they can't do. And there's a lot of people, even though the things are not available, they get into a habit, they develop a lousy habit, in my opinion, it's a lousy habit, of saying, had that store been open, I'd have finished that goddamn thing now. And they'll ride that, and what they do is they get high blood pressure, and they get ulcers, and they become irritable, edgy. You can consider the nervous system, if you want to understand it better, if this is your hand. Imagine the skin being peeled off, or sandpaper rubbed on the skin. And that's the way the insides feel. When you want something and you can't get it done, you feel very edgy. You're ready to move, but there's no way you can move. Setting aside is the answer. Now, how do you set it aside? You look at the situation, go to a movie, pick up a book, flip on TV, string beads. Whatever you do, set it aside.
If you know you really can't finish it, there are a lot of things you put aside and you say, well, maybe I ought to get back to it, maybe I shouldn't. Well, you could finish it.
Here's what that has to do with. If I'm a writer,
tired,
and this company wants my stuff at a given time, and they pay my rent, and they give me a down payment of $5,000 for the book, I can write as young, I can tell you, I don't worry. But if I can hardly pay the rent, and I need dental work, the back end of the car isn't working, and I'm writing a script that may sell,
or may not.
I may shove it in the fucking drawer. I'm not going to sit there and write with a toothache while I can't pay the rent and the back end of the car is wearing out. I won't submit myself to that kind of abuse. Now, I call that self-abuse.
Self-abuse?
Yeah, in that sense. That's
I mean, if you let yourself go too far, I don't do that either, but you mean...
When you're irritated at life's things, don't try to build a Tesla car.
You're irritated at life? But maybe these guys, a lot of inventors, I bet do. I bet they haven't got a penny left to their name, and they do that. How about those guys?
Yeah, well, they do.
And they're irritated, and their babies are crying, and their wife is cursing them, but they keep going.
They get
do?
ulcers.
You think it's
they belch. They have their problems. They have colitis. They have nervous disorders. They have tics. So the point is setting things aside and reserving your drive for D-Day. You know what D-Day is? When we invaded Normandy?
When you need
when all the ships came in. So the army says, soon we will move in on the Germans. Not yet. First we have to take this area and that area. So they set things aside for D-Day. None of us have our D-Day. Now look what would happen. Suppose you got your D-Day. You got your 100,000 a year contract on a radio show, all that sort of thing, and he's got a cancerous growth. What do I need it now for? There are things that happen to people that interfere even with D-Day. So looking forward to D-Day, let's assume that socio-cyberneering goes through, and we've got the funds for the first city, and I get a heart attack. You know what I mean? Then you sit back and say, well, now, what do you want to do now? What is it you want to do now? And so whatever plans you make, whatever goes through, there may be other irritable factors that can come in, things that are hard to deal with. And so if you learn how to set things aside, you're less apt to get a heart attack. Less apt to. But if you are tense in everything you do, I don't suggest that you relax, because you still have to get back to the problem. I would say that if a person comes home from work and they're uptight and they drink a little wine and relaxes them, maybe all right. or if you sit back and relax, it may be all right. But your attitude about a problem that puts you uptight is what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in you coming home practicing the other. What I'm interested in is you learning how to confront situations and diminish the irritation. You understand? So you don't need to get back
a real
and
situation.
start by relaxing all the way up.
Oh, I see.
In other words, the reason I don't like that kind of thing is because there's no training in diminishing irritability.
Well, the yoga exercises, presumably, the yoga exercises will carry over into other areas.